Just half an hour ago, Inga found out that her husband, whom she had always loved and cherished, had a lover. Her world suddenly collapsed in the blink of an eye. Everything she had built with sincere love suddenly collapsed like a sandcastle washed away by the waves. This incident happened so suddenly, as if such things always happen without warning. Inga happened to drive past Sasha's workplace and saw him coming out, standing near the entrance of the building. She was about to stop to greet him, but another woman appeared before her. It was a dark-haired girl with long, silky, well-groomed hair, wearing high heels. She approached Inga's husband and gave him a kiss on the lips. Sasha seemed very satisfied with the kiss. He gently hugged the girl and they both got into his car, then drove away in an unknown direction. Inga remained in the car, her mouth agape, unable to speak or move. A series of questions swirled in her mind. Who was she? How long had they known each other? Why hadn't she noticed any signs before? But she would have to figure out all these questions herself later. For now, Inga needed to pick up her and Alexander's daughter from school. Inga took her daughter to school every day and picked her up after school. They had 2 children, both of whom Inga took care of completely. Her husband earned money to support the family and did not hesitate to spend on them. Inga worked from home when she could. She was a translator of French and German, working part-time, only because they had a 4-year-old son who went to kindergarten. They lived in a separate house in a suburban residential area, and that was why Inga's life had such a rhythm. But while she was taking care of the children, her husband was walking around with some dark-haired girl. She felt very hurt, but there was nothing she could do about it at the moment. She could not and did not want to cause trouble in the street. It did not suit her. And now she could not chase after those 2 lovers anymore. Inga decided that tonight she would tell her husband about what she had seen with her own eyes and ask him about everything he was hiding. Alexander returned from work around 9 p.m. At that time, Inga was putting her son to sleep, and her daughter was reading in the room. Since childhood, Inga and her daughter Natasha watched Harry Potter movies together, and since then, the girl has been crazy about Harry Potter, devouring all the books about this character and watching the movies. Her parents did not forbid this hobby. Inga, after putting her son to sleep, went down to the kitchen, where Sasha was having dinner. "Hello, honey," her husband went up to kiss her on the cheek. She turned away and ignored the kiss. "What's the matter?" her husband asked in surprise. "Why are you ignoring me, Sasha? Don't you have anything to say to me?" she asked. He made a surprised face. "Today, by chance, I passed by your office, saw you standing on the street, and saw a dark-haired girl approaching you. She treated you like me, kissed you. You also hugged her like you hugged your wife. Tell me the truth. Do you have a lover? Who was she?" Alexander quietly listened to his wife's words without answering. "Inga, you don't want to settle this relationship right now," he said. "That is, you don't want to settle it, but you want to betray me." She didn't give up. She felt deceived. Finally, Sasha took a deep breath and said, "Yes, I have a lover. She is my colleague, but Inga, I don't want to change anything. You and the children are still the most important to me, and she is just." She was angry, "So you want to say, live as before? Is that what you want to say? Do you think I will forgive this betrayal?" Alexander became worried. He was not at all pleased with Inga's behavior, or rather, he did not expect it from her. He never thought that the truth would come out. He wanted his life to continue as it was, a life full of love with his mistress. "Remember one thing, Inga, I will not give you a divorce. The children must live in a complete family," he replied rudely. "You are a scoundrel, Sasha. You abandoned us for some woman at work," the woman said in tears and left the kitchen. That night, husband and wife slept in different rooms. Alexander did not go to Inga's room to sleep, and the next morning he left the house early when his wife and children were still asleep. They met at university. Inga studied foreign languages, and Sasha graduated from the Faculty of Information Technology and Informatics. People with completely different interests met by chance at a university event. Inga's group of friends and Sasha's group of friends interacted and parted ways, but a sudden feeling arose between Inga and Sasha, which turned into friendship the next day, and then into a relationship. They did not date for long. Inga became pregnant, and Sasha proposed to her. Inga finished university with Natasha in her arms. With the help of her parents, they came to take care of the baby during exams. In normal times, Sasha's mother helped them. So Sasha was already a successful young man, with an apartment, a car. They sold their apartment a few years after they got married, saved up some money, and bought a nice big house. 3 years after Natasha was born, Inga started working at a large translation agency in the city, but she lasted less than a year because she got pregnant again, this time with a boy. She had to quit her job again and switch to remote work. This form of work now suits her and her husband, Alexander. Someone in the family has to take care of the upbringing and development of the children, and Inga has done a good job of it all this time. Inga's husband, after graduating from university, worked at a large company, where he rose to the position of department manager. Inga always helped her husband with all the work, or at least did not interfere with his work. If Sasha needed to work late, that was fine. If Sasha needed to work on the weekend, that was fine too. But what did she have now? 2 small children in her arms, a part-time translation job at an online company. Inga felt sorry for herself. Putting aside all hesitation, Inga decided to act. Tonight, she wanted to talk to her husband again to find out how he saw their future life together. The conversation took place, but it was not in Inga's favor. "I repeat, I do not want a divorce, but I cannot part with Masha right now," her husband replied. "What do you mean it cannot be?" Inga asked in surprise. "She is pregnant," the man said guiltily. This was something Inga had not expected at all, but having to endure her husband's betrayal, coupled with Inga's inability to accept the fact that her husband's mistress was pregnant. "I will file for divorce, and that is final. Our life together is no longer possible," Inga said, almost in tears. "Maybe you're right, Inga. But remember, you won't get much from me if you file for divorce." "I don't want a divorce, because it would damage my reputation," but Inga was determined and could not be stopped. "I'll file for divorce tomorrow," she repeated. "Even if you object, I won't live with you, knowing that you have a lover." "Inga, think again. I'll leave you with nothing and take the child," her husband threatened. His words only made Inga angrier. "You try to take the child from me," she shouted, and, as yesterday, with tears streaming down her face, ran into her bedroom. Inga kept her word, and the very next day she appeared at the marriage registry office. Since they had a child, their divorce would have to be settled in court, but before that, the court would give them a month to reconcile. However, this reconciliation did not happen. Alexander still came home to sleep overnight, but he did not speak to Inga. One day when Inga was at home, Alexander did not come alone, but with his mistress, Masha. Inga noticed that Masha's belly had grown a little rounder, indicating that she was indeed pregnant. Inga came down from the second floor and saw her husband and Masha drinking tea and chatting happily in her kitchen, where she prepared meals for the children and Sasha every day. They even drank tea with the pancakes that Inga had made for the children's breakfast. "What is this? You are too much. Who have you brought into our house?" Inga asked Sasha right in front of Masha. "I am going to live here instead of you," Masha said lazily as she finished her pancake. "Who told you that you would live here?" "This is the house of my husband and my children," Inga replied. "But your husband is going to become my husband, and he will be nothing to you anymore. We will take your children and have a big family with many children," Masha replied. "Sasha, say something." Inga turned to her husband, who had not participated in the quarrel between his wife and her lover all this time. "Tell me that all this is not true." "Inga, I asked you not to file for divorce, but you didn't listen to me and did what you wanted. So I'm going to divorce you, but I'm taking the house and the children." "What? I can't do that." "The children are attached to me. I've been raising them all this time," Inga replied. Yes, but I don't have the money to raise them and develop them properly. How much do I earn from my translation work? About 30,000. Hearing these words, Alexander burst out laughing. That's not enough for me to rent a decent apartment, let alone clothes or developmental activities for the children. Don't you feel ashamed to say such things? Inga felt very hurt by these words. We loved each other. I loved you, loved our children, loved this house, and you. You destroyed everything. I won't let you take the children, and I will fight for the property, she replied. Inga could no longer bear to see the defiant face of Masha, who was all this time gently stroking her round belly. Alexander and Masha stayed in the kitchen for another half an hour, then left the house. Inga could not understand why her husband was doing all this. Why would he bring his mistress into the house, knowing that she was there? This obviously couldn't have gone unnoticed. Their daughters were starting to notice something was wrong. Mommy, why doesn't Daddy come home sometimes? Where does Daddy sleep then? Asked their second grader. Inga didn't know how to explain to her children that she and Sasha were on the verge of divorce without hurting them. You see, Daddy and I are having some difficult problems right now. There will come a time when Daddy will live separately from us, my dear. We will live together, and Daddy will live somewhere else. But you can still see him, go out with him, and spend time with him. Our life is like this now, and it will change soon. Inga explained the situation to her daughter, but since she was still young, her daughter did not understand everything and could not believe that her father would soon live separately. The day of the court hearing came. Inga and Sasha were about to divorce. Alexander came to court with his lover, which was not at all what Inga had expected. She thought that they would divorce peacefully, the children would stay with her in the house, and Sasha would move out, but he filed an objection to determine the whereabouts of the children and the division of property. Yes, they divorced that day, but for Inga, it was only the beginning of a nightmare. 3 days after the divorce was finalized, Sasha appeared, but not alone, but with Masha. Inga, we came with Masha. This is my house too, isn't it? Said the ex-husband. Inga looked at her husband with empty eyes, unable to understand how the man she once loved could be so shameless, bringing his lover into the house where she lived with her children. Sasha, are you in your right mind? Your children still live here. Will you tell them who she is? If you don't like it, then move out. As for the children, they will get used to living with her. Sasha deliberately hugged Masha in front of Inga and kissed her on the forehead. There will be a court hearing soon, and I will take both the house and the children from you. You won't be able to do anything, Sasha. I will do everything to keep my children. Inga realized that there was no point in continuing the conversation and left, while Sasha and Masha took over the living room. Inga was still living in her bedroom. Inga was not prepared for this situation. Returning to her bedroom, she thought about what to do next, but she could not live in the same house with them anymore, so she went up to her children's room and told them to quickly pack their things. We are leaving the house, she told them. Mom, where are we going and why do we have to leave the house? Natasha asked, asking a series of questions. Natasha, I will explain everything later. Now we have to leave quickly. She began to pack the children's things into suitcases, as well as collect all her and the children's papers, take her work laptop with her. Then, quietly, so as not to be seen by Sasha and her lover, she went to the garage, got into the car and left. Mom, where are we going? Asked her son. I don't know, honey, Inga replied in confusion. How could I not know? Natasha asked again. Inga realized that she needed to calm down and decide where to go with the children. To her mother-in-law's house, but they would definitely side with her husband and help him keep the children. Now she was very worried about the children. She understood that Sasha could seriously take them away from her. To her mother-in-law's house, but she lived in another area, and Natasha still needed to go to school and be near her friends. But she had no friends with whom she could go to the children at any time of the day or night. She had money, plus a bank card where her husband deposited money for the needs of the family and children. She tried not to spend her salary, so over the past year she had saved a considerable amount. Inga could rent an apartment, and that was what she decided to do. She stopped the car on the side of the road and started looking for rental sites. Pretty quickly she found a suitable apartment not far from Natasha's school. Inga decided not to take her son to kindergarten right now. She called the number listed in the notice. "Hello, good evening, I would like to rent your 2-room apartment." "Yes, right now," she said into the phone. "Good afternoon, right now," the man on the other end of the line asked again. "Yes, my 2 children and I are looking for an apartment. We need it right away, okay? Come here. I'll be there in about 40 minutes, and Inga drove to the address given. While waiting for the landlord, she and the children had time to explore the area. There was everything necessary for life: shops, pharmacies, cafes, but her children were still nervous, not used to leaving the cozy house they had become familiar with and moving to a strange apartment, so it was not surprising that Natasha asked more questions. "Mom, how long will we live in this apartment?" "I'm not sure, honey, but I think we'll be here for a few months. If we like the apartment, we can stay longer." "So, who will live in our house?" the girl asked, still not finished. "Daddy lives there with another woman now. That's why we can't go back there right now." Inga explained to her daughter. "Daddy left us for another woman, right?" "Mom, yes, but Daddy still loves you. It's just that we've decided to live separately for a while. Sometimes Daddy and I can't live together forever." Inga explained to her daughter, trying not to let her have negative memories of her father. As they were talking, the landlord arrived. He was a tall, polite, middle-aged man. "Hello, are you Inga?" he asked as he approached. "Yes, it's me," Inga replied, squeezing her children's hands. "Let's go see the apartment," and the man led them into the building. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. "We used to live here with our family, but we expanded our living space, and now we rent this apartment." Inga entered the apartment and immediately liked it. The apartment was bright, with new furniture and good fixtures. It felt cozy and comfortable. "I agree to rent this apartment for a long time," Inga quickly replied, afraid that Nikolai would change his mind and she would have nowhere to go with the children. He prepared the contract, gave her the keys, and wished them all the best. "If there are any problems during the stay, call me, we will solve them," Nikolai said and left the apartment. "How about it, children? We will live here for a while. Choose your rooms," Inga said to the children. "Which room do you want to sleep in?" The children chose the largest room, and Inga kept the other one for herself. "Natasha, tomorrow Artyom and I will take you to school. Wait for me at school. If Sasha's dad comes, be sure to call me right away." "Okay, honey." Inga sat down and talked to her daughter. She was worried that one day, when she picked Natasha up from school, she would no longer be there. Inga's life was no longer the same, but things were not so bad. In the morning, she and her son Artyom took Natasha to school. Then they returned to their rented apartment, and Inga started working. She had to increase her workload because she needed more money. And she wanted to hire a lawyer to file a lawsuit against the division of property and the residence of the children. Inga asked her only friend to find a good lawyer. "Dasha, I need a good lawyer right away," Inga called her friend. "No problem," Dasha replied. Dasha had connections with people who knew good professionals, and in just one day she sent the lawyer's contact information to Inga. Inga called him and arranged a meeting. When they met, she brought all the necessary documents with her. They agreed to meet at a cafe, which had a children's play area, so Inga had no choice but to take Natasha and Artyom with her. The cafe was not far from their rented apartment, and as soon as they entered, Inga's children immediately ran to the play area, and she chose a table. And to her surprise, the man who had just entered the cafe was their landlord, and also the lawyer she had been waiting for. "Hello, Inga," he said as he sat down. "I didn't expect you to be waiting for me here." I was completely surprised too. Inga was shocked by the coincidence. "So you have family problems," he said, and she nodded. "And now you are arguing about the children and property," he continued, and Inga nodded again. "I never thought this would happen to me. I thought things like this only happened in movies. But it turns out it happens in real life too. Inga began her story, her eyes almost filled with tears. In my legal career, I've seen worse things than this, Nikolai told her. Tell me more about what happened. It will make it easier for me to work with you. He was pregnant with her. I found out by accident when I passed by my husband's workplace and saw them together. I asked Sasha about everything. Sasha was my husband's name, and he didn't deny anything. He admitted that he had Masha. He threatened that if I filed for divorce, he would take the child from me and offered to keep the status quo. But I couldn't live like that. After he brought his mistress to our house, I filed for divorce and we got divorced. But Alexander filed an objection and now wants to take the child from me. I thought I would live in the house with Natasha and Artyom. Inga looked at the children playing. But a week ago, Sasha came to us with his mistress, and I couldn't stay there anymore. I took the children, and we rented your apartment. Nikolai listened to Inga attentively and made notes in his notebook. What about money? Does your ex-husband provide for you? Yes, he provides for you. He doesn't leave me and the children without anything. I try to work remotely and take care of the children. I never sit idle. But to be honest, I never thought that Sasha would kick me and the children out of the house. But he didn't kick you out, did he? Yes, but I can't live with them. He created conditions that made me leave on my own. His mistress sits there laughing at him. Inga complained. What do you want from Alexander? I want the children to stay with me. I'll let him see them whenever he wants, and I think I'm entitled to half the property too, Inga said. Nikolai, am I not right? Inga, I can't say who is right in this case. Everyone has their own reasons. And taking the children away from their working mother and taking care of them is difficult. So I think the children will stay with you. As for the property, we need to consider it carefully. Family matters are often complicated, Nikolai commented. At that moment, Inga's children ran to the table and started eating the pizza she had ordered for them. After eating quickly, they ran to the playground. I can't imagine life without them. Inga's tears began to flow. I can't imagine that Masha will replace me in waking them up in the morning and feeding them breakfast. Come on, Inga, calm down. Don't make things more complicated than necessary. Your children will be with you, Nikolai consoled her. Thank you very much, Nikolai, both for the apartment and for taking on my case, she thanked him. It's my job, but I haven't started working yet. So don't thank me so soon, Nikolai said. Inga gave the lawyer all the necessary documents, after which he left. They agreed to stay in touch and work out any problems together. Inga stayed at the cafe with the children for another half hour before returning home. Meanwhile, Masha, who had now become Inga's rival and taken her place in Alexander's life, kept putting pressure on her lover. It was she who urged Sasha to move with her into the house where Inga still lived with the children. Masha, but Inga and my children live in the house. Sasha tried to protest. Then let them move out, she argued. I'm pregnant with your child and don't want to be stuck in my small apartment with a child, and Sasha did as she was told, taking Masha to her own house, where she quickly adapted. Sasha wanted to take the child away from Inga only out of anger and resentment towards his ex-wife. He was furious when he learned that his wife had filed for divorce because he did not want a divorce. He saw everything as fine. His mistress, who was going to give birth to his child, he intended to help financially, but he still wanted to live as before with Inga. But his mistress fought for the house, and he did not object, not caring where Inga would live after being left alone. Nikolai approached the matter very seriously. He carefully studied Alexander's background, because in his circle he was known as a smart, cunning, and very cunning person. In the IT company where Sasha worked, Nikolai had a good acquaintance who worked in a related department and also held a managerial position. Nikolai asked to meet with him, and he did not refuse. Thank you, Boris, for meeting me, Nikolai began the conversation. I'm currently working on a case. A girl's husband wants to take her child away from her. He has a mistress at work and is currently fighting with his ex-wife. He works in the same company as you. Who is it? Boris asked. Alexander Chernov. Oh, I know this guy. Everyone knows what kind of person he is. Since he met Masha, he's changed for the worse. And you know Masha too. Who doesn't know her? She works in the personnel department. She's been through many hands. Now it's Chernov's turn. It's rumored that she had an affair with the general director himself, but this information has not been 100% confirmed on the surface. No one can deny that she's a beautiful girl, but on the inside she's a poisonous snake, Boris said recently. Alexander's relationship with the general director has seriously deteriorated. I don't know exactly what happened between them. Maybe it's because of Masha. Is it because he's been with her? Nikolai asked. That's not it. The CEO has long since stopped caring about Masha. He's married, and when his wife found out about something in the company, she came and caused a ruckus that is still being discussed behind our scenes. The CEO seems to be a serious person, but in fact he is very afraid of his wife, so the affair with Masha must have ended a long time ago, Boris explained, and after a pause he added, again, these are just rumors. Recently there was talk that Alexander leaked company data to a competitor, but no one could prove this. Nikolai realized that this could be a complicated case to investigate, but he had no choice but to deal with it. Because he did not want to disappoint his client. He was used to working honestly. In 2 weeks the first hearing on determining the residence of the children would take place. Nikolai was the least worried about this, because he had collected all the necessary documents and was ready to prove in court that he saw that she was a good mother. He had seen it himself when they first sat in the cafe. He had watched how Inga treated Natasha and Artyom, how she talked to them, how she looked after them. 2 weeks passed quickly, and the day of the trial had come. Inga was very nervous because today her life could change completely. But surprisingly, the trial went smoothly. Alexander came without Masha and did not cause trouble. Inga knew her ex-husband in every detail, from his appearance to his behavior, and she could clearly see that he was in trouble, but Inga had no intention of comforting him. She was not the one who had started this stupid game that had changed her life and the lives of her children. The court had left the children with their mother. Inga was delighted, because now she could safely take Natasha to school, knowing that her daughter would also stay with her in the evenings. Sasha could see the children whenever he wanted, but only by prior agreement. This seemed to suit him, especially since his work was facing major problems. Alexander has been working in this company for a long time and understands that he needs a promotion or at least a raise. But this is not promised, so he begins to learn about the rival company. A large company has rapidly grown into a modern competitor, and this makes Sasha's director very upset. He is indignant that a rival has appeared in the city. The director demands that everyone become better, to surpass the competitors. Sasha is angry that the director demands a lot but does not increase the salary. So Alexander goes to the rival and says that he will give them many secrets of the current company in exchange for money. At first they say that they will think about it, but then they agree and pay a large sum of money to Alexander, and he reveals all the information he knows. The director knew about the leak, but did not know who did it, and in a meeting he angrily shouted, but everyone was silent because no one knew who the traitor was in the company, except Alexander Chernov. Meanwhile, the rival company has grown and begun to prosper, and Alexander hopes that he will be offered a job with them, but this does not happen. The leadership of the rival company maintains the principle that a traitor once can betray a second time. The job begins to annoy Sasha. It no longer brings him joy because he expects more from it, but does not get it. Add to this the tantrums of Masha, who is pregnant, from lack of money to the small house, or she is tired of cleaning and wants to hire a maid. She continues to fight for the big house they live in, but the fight for the children ends happily for Inga after a successful trial. Nikolai invites Inga to celebrate the victory in a cafe. She agrees, and he takes her to a cozy little restaurant on the riverbank, where Inga chooses the best dishes. Today she had to reward herself. She deserved it after all the sleepless nights and stress. Meanwhile, Inga noticed that Nikolai was not wearing a wedding ring, But she did not ask directly about his marital status. He shared with her himself. "Inga, looking at you reminds me of my ex-wife," he corrected. "That is, I am divorced like you." "Then I hope your divorce is smoother than ours. You are a lawyer, you certainly know how to resolve conflicts peacefully." "Actually, my divorce was not entirely smooth either. We lived together for many years as neighbors, each minding his own business, and when we came home, we hardly spoke to each other. Neither she nor I wanted that. Things continued like that until one day she told me that she wanted a divorce because she had met another man who was caring and loving, and she wanted to live with him. But to do that, she needed a divorce to clear things up. She told me that she could cheat on me, go see that man during the day and come back to me in the evening, but she couldn't do that. I didn't like it very much. I was very angry. I couldn't accept being abandoned. My self-esteem was hurt. I also said that I wouldn't allow a divorce and that our only son would live with me. Those words hurt her, but only now I realized that women should be the ones to raise children, and we, men, shouldn't treat them like that. Just to satisfy our pride. "So how did things end with your wife?" Inga asked curiously. "My ex-wife remarried to a man she met when we were still living together. Our son stayed with her, and I had to work a lot on myself. The apartment where she lives with the children now used to be ours. I remember that time. It was so happy when Semyon was born there. After that, we saved enough money and decided to buy a bigger apartment, but didn't sell this one. I thought my son would live there, but he went to school in another city, and so I rented this apartment now. Looking back, I understand that happiness is not in square meters, but in people, in your loved ones. I propose we raise a glass to that," Inga said. And they decided to buy a bottle of wine to celebrate their successful lawsuit. "To you, Inga, to find your happiness again. To you and your children." They raised their glasses, sipping their wine. They didn't stay long because Inga had to pick up Artyom from kindergarten. On the way back, he told her that her ex-husband was in big trouble at work, and he might have to face the law. Hearing these words, Inga began to worry about her ex-husband, but she didn't show it to Nikolai, only starting to think about what her husband had done that could lead to him having to face the law. But Inga had no one to ask about this. She only occasionally talked to her father-in-law about general matters, and she also asked him not to talk about her or her ex-husband in front of the children, so that they wouldn't be affected. As for Nikolai, he happened to find out that a rival firm of Alexander's was looking for a temporary lawyer for a particular job. He saw this notice online while looking at job postings. Seeing the notice, he called and was invited to an interview the next day. The interview was quite difficult for him, since the company's management seemed to have worked in the security industry, and they questioned him very carefully, perhaps not wanting important information to leak. Nikolai had completed a temporary job, advising the company's CEO in an important meeting. He impressed the management so much that they decided to keep him on as a part-time lawyer, occasionally inviting him to participate in the company's cases. This way of working suited him perfectly, since Nikolai mostly worked freelance, but he still found time for these important meetings. During his time at the company, Nikolai became close to the CEO's secretary, Ludmila. Everyone called her Dear Ludmila because she was a beautiful young girl who had just graduated from college and had just joined the company full-time, but she had been working part-time here since her third year of college. She was familiar with the inner workings of the company. It was from Ludmila that Nikolai decided to take action. "Ludmila, do you know all the employees in the company?" Nikolai asked once when the two of them were alone. "Yes, almost everyone. There are only 2 large companies in the city, and the one in the industrial zone seems to be closing down," the secretary replied. "Why do you think so? Employees are leaving that company and telling us their secrets," said Ludmila. "What did you just say?" Nikolai could not believe that what was being said about Alexander was true. "Oh, I shouldn't say this," the girl realized in surprise. But it was too late. Nikolai had caught her thought. "Nikolai Petrovich, please Don't tell anyone about this, otherwise the boss will fire me. Don't worry, I won't say anything, Nikolai reassured. Actually, the head of the rival company, Alexander Chernov, sold us the information for a large sum of money, and it all happened at night. I was called in to record everything she said. Nikolai was delighted to have discovered the truth. During the division of property, Nikolai met with Alexander Chernov's lawyer several times, but he wanted to meet Alexander in person to set some conditions. Alexander agreed to meet, but was not at all comfortable. Actually, all these issues are handled by my lawyer. I have identified all the troublesome aspects of this situation for him, Alexander Chernov said in a stern voice when he met Nikolai. Alexander, I want to discuss something with you, something that no one else should know. Nikolai gently hinted that he knew something that no one else should know. What is it? Alexander asked in a surprised tone. Alexander, I don't want to blackmail you, but if you don't agree to my client's conditions, you may lose your good position in the company you work for. This is blackmail, Sasha objected. No, this is not blackmail, but a warning. I know something about you that no one else should know, Nikolai said. Alexander slammed the table, startling Nikolai. I will destroy you, he shouted, standing up abruptly. I will not give up my claim to the property, and you will prove nothing more, he said, and left. Nikolai sat back and pondered what had happened, knowing full well that Sasha would not agree to his terms. He realized that he would have to act alone and could only hope for Ludmila. The day of the trial on the division of property between Sasha and Inga was approaching, and Nikolai was preparing carefully. So was Inga. 2 days before the trial, Nikolai had a conversation with Inga. Inga, you must be ready for anything, he warned her. What do you mean by ready for anything? Do I have no chance of keeping the house? No, you have a very good chance of keeping half the house, but some details about Alexander's work may come up in court, Nikolai replied. Nikolai had to try very hard to convince Ludmila to attend this trial. He also sent a notice to the current director of Alexander Chernov and invited him to the court. The CEO needed to know what his employees had been doing all this time. Nikolai wanted to open the director's eyes to his staff at the trial. As long as it doesn't affect my children, Inga replied. She had decided that she would no longer live with Sasha, and his life was his life. He chose his own path. She needed to continue building her own life. I understand, Inga. We'll see each other again at the trial, Nikolai replied calmly. Without you, I don't know what would happen to me and the children, Inga sighed. 2 days passed quickly. Inga didn't even notice the time passing. She came to the court alone, without bringing the children. They didn't need to witness the argument between her and Sasha. In the court, her ex-husband didn't even greet her, but he didn't forget to bring his mistress, Masha. Inga didn't expect anything more. In the court, she sat next to Nikolai. When the judge entered and began listening to the statements, she asked about the former couple's joint assets. They had a 180 square meter suburban house and 2 cars, one belonging to Alexander, the other being used by Inga. Alexander wanted all this property for himself, arguing that it was all bought with his money. So what has your wife, Inga Chernov, been doing all these years? The judge asked. She took care of the children, stayed at home with them, Alexander replied. So Inga Chernov did not work, but took care of the children. She contributed to the development of your family. Children are also part of the family, and someone has to take care of them. The roles between the two were divided the way most families are divided. When the children grew up, the wives would go back to work, the judge commented. But she did not help me financially, and nothing in our property was bought by her, Alexander continued to argue. I understand, Alexander. Please sit down, the judge said. Then the judge asked Inga to stand and talk about what she wanted from the estate. I think I'm entitled to half of the house and the car I've been using all this time, she replied. I think it should be divided equally, especially since our children are with me and we need a place to live. I'm not asking for anything more, Inga said. I heard you, Inga, the judge said. But then Inga asked the judge to call a key witness. "Is this relevant to our case?" the judge asked. "Yes," Inga replied softly. Even though it wasn't entirely true, she needed to take down her ex-husband. "Okay, bring the witness in," the judge said. When Alexander saw who had entered the courtroom, his eyes widened in shock. Ludmila, the secretary, entered and looked for Nikolai's eyes. When she received Nikolai's approval, she became more confident. She walked across the courtroom and took her seat. "Your Honor, I would like to say that Alexander Chernov is a dishonest person," she began. "What do you mean by dishonest? Please explain clearly," the judge demanded. "He betrayed his current boss," she said. Hearing these words, Alexander tensed up and looked towards his director, who was sitting in the courtroom. Only now did he begin to understand why his director was present at the trial, and the whole picture began to become clearer to him. "He revealed all the company's secrets and strategies to a competitor," she said loudly. What Alexander's director shouted. "Chernov, so it was you. You were the rat in our ship," the director shouted, banging his gavel on the table. The judge called for order. "Let the witnesses finish speaking. Then those who have something to say will be allowed to speak. I warn you, talk only about matters related to the case." Then the judge turned to Ludmila. "Go on." Ludmila said, "He offered my director money in exchange for important information about his company." "You fool. What nonsense are you talking about? That didn't happen." Alexander shouted. "Quiet, keep order," the judge warned again, but to no avail. "Alexander Chernov, I am forced to ask you to leave the courtroom. You did this to yourself. Security, take him out." Two men in uniform stepped forward, grabbed Alexander's arms, and led him out of the courtroom, even as he continued to scream and hurl insults at Ludmila. "Chernov, you are fired," his director shouted as he was taken away. The judge turned to Ludmila. "Ludmila, you are responsible for your words. This is a serious charge." "Yes, Your Honor. Everything happened before my eyes. This transaction took place in the middle of the night." "Can you confirm these words?" the judge asked the executive sitting in the courtroom. "Yes, there was a leak in our company a month ago, but we have not yet found the culprit. I do not deny that it is very likely that Mr. Chernov did it, because as the head of the department, he has all this information," the man replied. "I understand." "Then sit down," the judge said. The judge continued to ask Inga Chernov, "Do you have any further comments or suggestions regarding the case?" "No, Your Honor. I have no further comments or suggestions," Inga replied. "Then the court will adjourn to make a decision." The judge stood up and left the courtroom. Inga and Nikolai remained in the courtroom. Nikolai approached Ludmila and thanked her again. "Ludmila, you did a great job," he said. Then the director of the rival company also came to see Ludmila. The girl told him everything she knew about the case. Half an hour later, the judge returned and was ready to read the verdict. The court decided to divide the joint marital property in half. According to the law, Inga Chernov has the right to half of the suburban house, along with the car she is currently using. Inga was very pleased with the result, but she did not know how to share the house with her ex-husband, because it would mean that she would have to continue communicating with Alexander and come to some kind of agreement. But anyway, the court fully supported what she and Nikolai had proposed. "I don't envy him," Nikolai said as they left the court. "He didn't get everything he wanted and was fired by the director. It will be difficult for him to find a job in this city, while his ambitions are great. Yes, I never thought things would come to this with Sasha. And I still have children to raise. But it's okay, I think I'll manage slowly. Maybe I'll find a full-time job soon," Inga said. "Everything we planned has been done," Nikolai said. "Yes, once again, thank you very much, Nikolai." "Thank you for appearing in my life," Inga said. "That's my job," Nikolai replied. Inga and Nikolai said goodbye warmly and went their separate ways. The girl thought that fate would probably not let them meet again. She transferred the rent money into his account, but things didn't go as she thought. 2 days later, in the middle of the night, Inga was awakened by the constant and urgent ringing of her phone. Although she usually put her phone on silent at night, this time she forgot. The phone kept ringing, and Inga, in her sleep, did not understand the sound. Then she realized that it was a phone and saw that the caller ID was Nikolai. "Hello," Inga answered. "Inga, call an ambulance immediately. Kirova 45, entrance 3, apartment 148," and Nikolai hung up. Inga jumped out of bed in a panic, started running around the bedroom, and then tried to call Nikolai back, but he did not answer. She became worried and decided to call an ambulance, because Nikolai could not have simply called her in the middle of the night and asked for help like that. "Hello, ambulance. A man in danger at Kirova 45, entrance 3, apartment 148," Inga said, referring to the address Nikolai had given her. "Okay, the call has been registered. Wait for the ambulance to arrive." Inga couldn't sleep, pacing the room, worried and wondering whether to go to Nikolai's house or not, because he might need help. But she had no one to look after the children. She could leave and come back quickly, but if Natasha or Artyom woke up and didn't see their mother at home, they would panic, and Inga couldn't let that happen. So she had no choice but to wait until morning, which was painful. She barely waited until morning, woke the children, took Natasha to school and Artyom to kindergarten, and then drove to the address Nikolai had given her last night. She had no idea where he lived until then. When she got to the address given, she quickly found apartment 145 and started ringing the bell, ringing for a long time and repeatedly, but no one opened the door. Then she started knocking. "Kolya, open the door, please open the door," she shouted through the door. Hearing her patient knocking, an old woman in her 70s came out and asked, "What are you making so much noise about? Does Nikolai live here?" "But he's not home, so where is he? Do you know?" Inga asked. "They say he was taken to the emergency room last night," the old woman answered, and went back to her apartment. Inga understood that something serious had happened to Nikolai. "But which hospital did they take him to?" she asked, but the old woman did not know. Inga was confused, and after calming down, she went out. Now she needed to find out which hospital Nikolai was in and what had happened to him. She was going to go home and call all the hospitals, but she did not need to do that because Nikolai had called her. "Inga, hello," Nikolai said very softly. "Kolya, hello." She was glad that Nikolai had contacted her. "What happened to you last night?" "I called you, but you did not answer." "I went to the address you told me, but there was no one there. You were beaten in the entrance," Nikolai answered very softly. "Which hospital are you in?" "I will be there soon. I am in the regional hospital on Lenin Street, the Department of Traumatology, room 307. Wait for me," Inga said, and at the same time she began to get dressed and leave the apartment. She arrived at the hospital in just half an hour because there was no traffic jam and the traffic lights were green. She also found the ward quickly, and they let her in to visit the patient without any difficulty. "Hello," Inga said happily as she entered the ward. Nikolai was also happy to see her. His head was bandaged, his hands and face were covered with scratches. "Who beat you? Do you know them?" Nikolai nodded silently. Yes, one of them was Alexander Chernov. What Inga opened her eyes wide in surprise. No way, Sasha couldn't have done that. "He was with someone I didn't know. They beat me right in the entrance. When I was still conscious, your ex-husband said if it weren't for you, I would still be working. You ruined everything for me." At first he fought back, but they attacked him together, pushed him down and kicked him until he stopped moving. They must have thought he was dead. "Oh my God, Nikolya, what happened to you?" "I'm so sorry for all this." Inga expressed her sympathy. "How did you call me?" she asked. "After they left, I was still lying there. I didn't want to scare the neighbors, so I didn't call them. I tried to get my phone out of my pocket. It was difficult, but I finally managed to call you. Somehow your number was in my recent calls. The rest you know," Nikolai said. "Have you called the police?" Inga asked. "No, but the paramedics did it for me. In these attacks, they always call the police. They came to see me today, and I told them everything, just like I told you. They will find Alexander, but he shouldn't have done that. Sasha got herself into this situation," Nikolai said, Nikolai suffered a closed head injury, bruises on his legs, and numerous scratches and open wounds, but he was recovering quickly. Every day, Inga visited him in the hospital, bringing him fresh fruit and food. Nikolai's son came to visit a few times, but his ex-wife did not. At least Inga never met her. During that time, Inga did not notice any other women in Nikolai's life. During this time, the two became very close. After Nikolai was discharged from the hospital, they often talked on the phone and talked about everything: life, travel, politics, animals, and children. Inga did not realize that this man had become very close to her. Nikolai decided not to withdraw the complaint about the assault, and Alexander would have to face charges, which Nikolai understood very well. And doesn't this upset you that the father of your children could go to jail? Or should I withdraw the complaint from the police? Nikolai once asked Inga. Inga was silent. Then she said, "I want to talk to Alexander." "It's time for us to meet to discuss the future of the dacha," she replied, and this was indeed the truth. Inga wanted to see Sasha. She called him once and suggested a meeting, but he couldn't come, and then Inga got caught up in work and household chores and forgot about the meeting. The next day, she plucked up the courage and called Sasha. "Sasha, hello. We need to meet," she said on the phone. "Then come to my dacha, if you can. I'm not at work now. Masha is sick, so I have to take care of the baby so the baby is born." Inga said in a tone that tried to sound cheerful, but in truth she felt very upset about it, although she couldn't help it. "Yes, a month ago I became a father for the third time," Alexander answered sadly. "Inga, are you coming to talk, or should we postpone this conversation for a while?" she replied. "Do you remember the address?" Sasha asked sarcastically. "Don't worry, I remember," she replied, without any sarcasm. Sarcasm is not appropriate, she thought. She quickly got ready and headed to the place she had called home for many years. When she arrived at the suburban house, she was quickly greeted by her dog Snisha and her children. Inga and the children loved Snisha very much, but when they left, they could not take him with them. "Hello, Snisha," she stroked the dog between the ears. "How have you been here without us?" "Are you okay?" the dog responded to her with a soft whine like a friend. Then Inga walked across the yard and into the house. She had not been here for 6 months, and in that time, everything seemed to have changed, at least in her opinion. The house now felt unwelcoming and looked neglected. Her thoughts were interrupted when Sasha walked into the living room, holding a newborn baby in her arms. Snisha noticed me coming when she started whining. Usually she greets visitors with a fierce bark, but she started barking when she saw Masha. Masha was afraid to go near her. "Is your baby a girl or a boy?" Inga asked. "A boy. His name is Dima," Sasha answered, starting to rock the baby in her arms. "Masha has been sick, with a fever for 2 days, but she refuses to call an ambulance. Actually, after giving birth, she became completely different. She often talked about postpartum depression and hardly took care of the baby. Now, I have no job, so I am helping her. She used to just lie there, lethargic and not want to do anything," Sasha said in a low voice. Inga understood what he was talking about. She had gone through the same thing after Natasha's birth. But then a friend who was a doctor forced her to see a psychiatrist who prescribed her medication. Inga still doesn't know what helped her overcome her depression, time or medication, but she remembers her friend emphasizing that it was very serious and sometimes had a bad outcome. The psychiatrist told of a case in his career when a young mother, who had just given birth 3 weeks earlier, fell into a severe depression, and no one took her to the hospital in time. Only the old mother said that we all gave birth and took care of children, and she would do it too. But the girl couldn't get over it on her own. After a while, she was taken from the provincial hospital to a psychiatric hospital, after jumping out of a window but surviving. After surgery, she was transferred to a psychiatric ward for further rehabilitation. Inga didn't know how the girl's story ended, but she understood that postpartum depression was real and very dangerous. "Sasha, you need to take Masha to the doctor," Inga said, although she didn't understand why she was doing this, why she was helping them when they had hurt her. But she couldn't do otherwise, because a child's life was at stake, and this child's life depended 90% on its mother, and its mother needed help. But she absolutely refused help. Sasha replied, "I also understand that she needs medication." "Then call an ambulance now. If Masha has had a high fever for 2 days," Inga encouraged. "Now?" Sasha asked hesitantly. "Yes, now," Inga insisted. "I'll look after the baby while you do this," she said, gently taking Dima from Sasha. Inga never thought she would be holding Sasha's child with his lover in her arms, but it happened. She didn't know what would happen next, but she felt like she was living in a movie. The baby lay still in Inga's arms for a while, then began to cry. She had to get up and walk around to comfort the baby, but this did not work. Finally, she took the baby outside, found a stroller and put him in it, then walked around the house. Inga did not know what helped the baby to fall asleep, whether it was the rocking or the pacifier she found in the stroller. Soon the baby was fast asleep. 15 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. Alexander led the doctors upstairs to the bedroom where Masha was lying. Inga did not follow them, because it was none of her business. After a while, the doctors from the emergency room came out with Masha. Sasha held a hastily packed bag. "Inga, I'll take Masha to the hospital and then come back. Can you stay with Dima for a while?" Sasha said, and then disappeared with the ambulance. Inga did not have time to answer. She still had time, but should she stay with this child? She had come here to solve a completely different problem. But now that she had no other choice, Inga started walking around the house with the stroller. After an hour, the baby woke up. Inga realized that the baby was crying because of hunger, but no one told her how to feed him. She picked up the baby and went into the house, found the living room, where there was a crib, and put the baby in it. Then she went into the kitchen to look for formula. She quickly found the milk and the bottle, proving that the baby had been fed with formula. Reading the instructions on the box on how to prepare the milk, Inga quickly finished preparing it, checked the temperature of the milk in the bottle, and then returned to Dima. She picked the baby up from the crib, sat down on the sofa and started feeding him milk. Dima quickly sucked the milk. The baby was very hungry. After drinking the last drop, the baby stopped and looked at Inga with curious eyes, the woman who was a complete stranger, but had temporarily replaced his mother. About 2 hours later, Alexander returned. "How is Masha?" Inga asked, still holding the baby in her arms. "She has pneumonia, which was detected by the X-ray. I also told the doctor that she had just given birth and was showing signs of depression. The doctor said that he would monitor her condition and that I would have to stay home and take care of the baby for the next few weeks," Sasha replied. "I think you'll do well," Inga replied. "Thank you so much for looking after the baby," Sasha said, and moved forward to take Dima from Inga. As they took the baby, their eyes met, their faces close together. Inga quickly backed away, realizing that she no longer felt anything for her ex-husband. Everything that had happened in the past months had completely alienated her from him. "It's nothing," she said. "If you need me, I can come and help look after the baby from time to time," she offered. "My mom will be staying with me to help with the baby, but if I need your help, I'll call." "Thanks again," Sasha said. "Sasha, actually, I came here to discuss the division of the house. I understand that it is cruel to throw you out with a sick Masha and a small child, but I also have to pay rent, and I don't have much money left. Would you agree to split the money from the sale?" Sasha asked. "You could buy an apartment in the city for this money. Even an apartment in the center, near schools and kindergartens." Inga thought about it and agreed, although it pained her to give up the house where she had raised her children. "You're probably right. I agree to this proposal," she replied. "Okay, I'll transfer the money to you soon," Sasha said. Inga had another request. Her voice became softer. "Nikolai, my lawyer, is ready to withdraw the lawsuit if you publicly apologize. Can you do that?" Sasha bowed her head. "You know, I realize the seriousness of what I did, If I were imprisoned, Dima would lose both his father and mother, he said. Okay, I'll talk to Nikolai, Inga said as she prepared to leave. Sasha, don't forget Natasha and Tioma. They're looking forward to seeing you, she added. Sasha replied, bring the children to me whenever you want. When Inga leaves the house, she thinks about Natasha and Tioma. The children really miss their father, always ask when he will visit, and want to return to their old house. She feels sad knowing that her children feel separated from what used to be their home. With the money Sasha will give, Inga can buy a spacious apartment for the whole family, create a cozy and comfortable house where her children will always feel loved and safe. She dreams about this and wishes that everything will come true. In the evening, Inga calls Nikolai and asks him to withdraw the lawsuit at Sasha's request. Kolya, you know, Sasha and Masha are in a difficult situation right now. She is in the hospital with postpartum depression, which is very dangerous, and Sasha has lost her job. Please withdraw the lawsuit. Inga begs. For me, I will withdraw it, Nikolai replies. Thank you very much. You're so kind, Inga blurted out the last two words, but they were like a soothing balm to Nikolai. He felt very happy to hear them. By the way, what did you and Sasha decide about the house? He asked. He'll pay you half the price of the house, Inga said. Why didn't you keep the house? Why didn't you claim ownership? Nikolai asked. I think the house is no longer mine. There's another woman, another child, and another man. I can't live there anymore, Inga explained. I see, Nikolai replied quietly. He was relieved to hear her talk about another man and understood that Inga had really left her ex-husband. I know a great place to look for a house, Nikolai said. That would be great, Inga replied. 2 weeks later, the money from the sale of the house was transferred to Inga's account, and she was ready to look for a new apartment. She told Nikolai, and together they started looking. They looked at several apartments, and Inga had picked out 3 that fit her criteria. Now she just had to decide which one to choose. Inga, you should look at the apartments again. This time with the children, Nikolai suggested. Inga did so, and one weekend, she, Natasha, and Tioma went to look at all 3 apartments. Surprisingly, her children quickly made a decision. Mom, I like this one the most because my room has a cat on the wall, Natasha said. And I like this one because it has a great children's playground, Artyom added. Okay, my dears, we'll choose this one, Inga said happily. 2 weeks later, Inga became the owner of the new apartment, and she, Natasha, and Tioma were very happy. They decided to have a housewarming party with their family. Mom, can I invite Uncle Nikolai to our housewarming party? Inga asked gently. She had gotten to know Nikolai so well that she wanted him to share this joy with the family. Of course, Mom, the children answered in unison. Natasha whispered in her mother's ear, I like him. This simple and sincere answer made Inga very happy. Nikolai accepted their invitation to the party, and he did not come empty-handed. He brought gifts for the children. Natasha received a Yandex Alice smart speaker, and Tioma received a large remote-controlled car. The children were so happy that they spent most of the evening in the playroom. Inga and Nikolai were left alone in the kitchen. Inga hadn't realized she had fallen in love with Nikolai. She had been so busy with work and her own thoughts, but now she couldn't imagine life without him. Kolya, can you stay with us tonight? She asked, not wanting to beat around the bush. I've wanted to for a long time, he said as he moved to hug her. I've been waiting for you to say it. I didn't want to pressure you, so I didn't bring it up. You've been through a difficult time, property divorce, raising a child. Not everyone can get through it, but you did. I was there for you the whole time and wanted to share those challenges with you to make them easier, Nikolai said. I can feel it. I know you've been worried about me, wanted to help me. Thank you so much for always supporting me. I love you, Inga said softly. I love you too, Nikolai replied. In the past, she had criticized women who quickly remarried after a divorce. She couldn't understand how people could forget their old love so quickly and love someone new. But now she realized that it was possible. A year ago, she had been convinced that Sasha was the only one she loved, but it turned out that she had been deeply mistaken. I love you more than I ever loved my ex-husband, Inga admitted to Nikolai. I never expected to meet true love again, Nikolai continued the heartfelt conversation. I wasn't happy in my previous relationship, but with you everything is completely different. completely different. He gently kissed Inga's earlobe, making her shiver. "Stay with us," Inga said. "What about the children? Will they accept me?" Nikolai was worried because he wanted Inga's children to feel comfortable with him. "I want to be close to them," he added. "I don't think they will object." "I'm very happy about that," Inga replied. "My son grew up without me, and now I want to make up for that. Maybe not with his son, but with other children he loved," Nikolai said. The next day, Nikolai moved his belongings to Inga's house. He decided to rent out his apartment. Inga continued to work remotely, but only to the extent that she could, since Nikolai now took over the family's financial responsibilities. As for Sasha and Masha, they divorced a year later. Masha recovered, but for unknown reasons she left Sasha with their son. Sasha decided to move to another city because he could no longer continue working in his field in this city. He offered Inga to return to their old house, but she refused because now she had a new happy family in her new apartment.